Idaho Matters podcast is brought to you by St. Luke's On-Demand Virtual Care, which allows patients to see a provider from their home using a computer or smartphone with on-demand care for common ailments, such as a cough, sore throat, or a sinus issue. More information at stlukesonline.org. The Senate has eliminated federal funding for public media, including dollars already promised to Boise State Public Radio. In places where there's no cell service, we may be the only way communities get wildfire or flood alerts. We have always served you, not shareholders. And now we need your support. Donate today at boisestatepublicradio.org and help keep Idaho informed, connected, and prepared. Federal funding is gone, rescinded by the U.S. Senate, including money already committed to Boise State Public Radio. For rural communities, that means more than a loss of news or even music. It means the potential loss of access to emergency information. If this station has ever helped you feel safe, more informed, or even less alone, this is the moment to give. Donate at boisestatepublicradio.org. When fire season hits or flash floods strike rural Idaho, who sounds the alarm? Well, often it's Boise State Public Radio. But now, after the Senate rescinded federal funding, including money already promised, our ability to deliver emergency alerts and trusted news is on the line. We're listener-powered now more than ever. And if this station matters to you, make your donation at boisestatepublicradio.org. Local news, fire alerts, music that brings us together. Boise State Public Radio isn't optional, it's essential. But after the Senate cut off federal support, we're facing a serious funding shortfall. Your gift today helps keep this free local service on the air for everyone in every corner of Idaho. Go to boisestatepublicradio.org and donate now.
From the studios of Boise State Public Radio News, I'm Samantha Wright, filling in for Gemma Goddard. It's Friday. That means it's time for our Reporter Roundtable. It's when we get you up to date on all the news that made headlines this past week. But before we get started, I wanted to bring on a very special guest. Gemma, can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
I can. That's Gemma Goddard. She's taking a quick break from her vacation to talk about what happened last night. Gemma, I think everybody around here is talking about it.
Right, Sam. And so if you're just tuning in and you haven't been following this story, Congress last night decided and passed a bill that would have funded public media. So we're talking PBS, we're talking NPR, Boise State Public Radio News. This was money that was already allotted by Congress, and this includes our state representatives here in Idaho, voted to not give that money. So what that means for Boise State Public Radio on a local level, that's 20% of our budget, 20% of our budget.
Ugh.
And Sam, that is a big deal. It is definitely a crisis. And I know you wanted to kind of take a little bit of time and explain what this means in terms of who PBS is, who NPR is, and where Boise State Public Radio falls in all of that.
Right. First off, we want to point out that we're still here. We weren't destroyed. Funding was cut. Funding will go away, but we're still here after last night's votes. NPR is still here. PBS, CPB, they're still here, but we need your help to stay here. Smaller stations, especially vulnerable, as you said, 20% of our budget. So we are asking for support to try and help make that up. The best way to do it is to go to our website. It's boisestatepublicradio.org. There is a gigantic banner right at the top on how you can help. We would love to get your support. We should point out, before we go any further, that if you're listening to this at 8 o'clock, you need to go to the website because, going to the phones, they're not always manned all day long, all night long. So go to the website. It's the best way to donate, to support us. And if you're listening at 6 on KISU, they need your support too. All of these stations and shows that you love, we're asking for you to help keep them on the air.
Oh, right. And Sam, as you mentioned, Boise State Public Radio, we are going to fill it. I mean, we are going to fill this hit, no matter what. When anyone has 20% of their budget go away suddenly, you're going to feel that. So, what does that mean for the listener? Well, that could mean less reporting. That could mean that it might take us longer to cover a story, right? That's why we're asking you to donate today. As Sam said, go to our website, boisestatepublicradio.org, because you're the only way for us to make up this difference. And we know that it matters to you. And with that said, I want to give some real life examples of what this could mean in particular for rural areas of our state. We have many pockets in our state where they don't have Wi-Fi coverage, right? They don't have access to other media news sources except for things like NPR. And when I say there are places that don't have Wi-Fi, here's why this matters. NPR nationally runs our emergency alert services. So that means when there's an emergency alert that needs to go out in Idaho, we do that. Take, for example, last summer when there was a fire that almost destroyed the Redfish Lake Lodge.
Ah, I
That
remember
whole
that.
area,
Yeah.
Sam, as you remember, had to be evacuated.
Mm-hmm.
That happened because of the emergency alert system. That is what's going to be affected. The
Yeah.
emergency alert system. So we're talking about severe weather. We're talking about fires, tsunamis, hurricanes, tornadoes, floods. People may not get those alerts. That
Evacuation
means,
alerts.
right, evacuation alerts. We are in the middle of fire season in Idaho, Sam.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen, you and I have covered lots of fires in the 2+ decades you and I have been in this industry. There have been many times where emergency alerts have gone out. That really could stop. That's why we need your support, because we need to keep Idahoans safe and informed. It's really that simple.
That's right. And you can do it by helping us out. Go to boisestatepublicradio.org, big banner at the top. I also wanted to point out, because I heard this a lot yesterday from folks, because I ran into a lot of people who were talking about this and who listen to Boise State Public Radio and to Idaho Matters. And they said, we're gonna send a check-in. And, we always send in a check-in to say PBS. And we should point out that NPR and PBS, we're all public media, but we're separate entities. And PBS needs your support, NPR needs your support, Boise State Public Radio needs your support. But if you're trying to give support directly to Idaho Matters, go to boisestatepublicradio.org. And if you want to support, one of the great shows on any of the other public broadcasting, go there and support them, because they too will need your help. It's important to know where your money's going and to support things like Idaho Matters. I heard a lot from people who say, I love Idaho Matters, I listen every day. Well, we need your help.
And Sam, I mean, I don't want to sound like an alarmist, right? But I do want people to know that this is serious. This is critical. And we need your financial support more than we ever have. When we say federal funding was taken away, that's what happened. I also want to thank every single person who picked up the phone or sent an email to our congressional leaders here in Idaho and asked them to vote no against this. They did not. They voted. Yes, they voted to rescind this money. But thank you to all of you who called, who emailed. It means the world to all of us to know that you support the work that we do, because it's not just about us. I mean, public radio it's public. It's supposed to be able to help everyone. It means that everyone should have access to this, no matter what your background is, no matter what your income is, no matter where you live, no matter what services you have or don't have. That's why public radio was created, so that it could be a source of news and information for everyone. And so if you can, we critically need your help. So again, go to our website, boisestatepublicradio.org, and make a donation in any dollar amount. We really truly need your help. We also need it to make sure that every Idahoan has access to this, that every Idahoan has access to emergency alerts. It is critical, Sam.
It is. And that's why we're here today. That's why you took a break from your vacation
I did.
to come on just to do this. You're going to be back next week. We've got some great stories ready for you when you come back. And this is where your money goes, folks. Doctors Roundtable. We're going to be talking with Dr. David Payette. We're going to be talking about the Koberger sentencing after that happens this week. We're going to be talking about Hialdi and Basque culture in Idaho. And this is all on Idaho Matters. If you love Idaho Matters, now's the time to love us. Send us some love our way. BoiseStatePublicRadio.org. Jim, I can't thank you enough for taking a break. Go ahead.
And Sam, really quick, I just want our listeners to know that I wasn't asked to come back during my vacation, right? I want to make that very clear. I was not mandated to come back. If you were listening this morning, I was on the air with our James Dawson, doing an emergency ask for folks to contribute financially. I was not asked to come on Idaho Matters. I want to make that very, very clear. This was my choice because this is how important I believe this moment is. That we are in historic times. We are in a place in our society, in our country, where we do need to step up. We need to say, yes, this matters. Um, and we want to continue doing the work that we do every single day for every Idahoan. So just wanted to make that clear. This was not a mandate from
Nope.
above for me to come on.
No, this was a text.
I made the choice.
This was a text texting you and I at 1 a.m.
Yeah.
Because that's what we do.
Yep.
News never stops. This was us at 1 a.m. And you said you wanted to come on, and we started working it out. And at 4 a.m, we were working that out, and here we are. And I'm glad we did this.
Me too.
Okay, let's dive into our Reporter Roundtable. Our reporters today, Sarah Cutler with the Idaho Statesman, Max Silverson with Star News, Laura Guido with the Idaho Capital Sun, and Brian Clark with the Idaho Statesman. Laura, I want to start with you. You had a story on the Graham-Hoffman Act, which was brought by our Idaho senators after the attack on firefighters in North Idaho. That was just a couple weeks ago. Remind us about the attack. That was, I think, at the end of June.
Yeah, at the end of June on like a Sunday afternoon, some firefighters responded to a fire in Coeur d'Alene at a popular recreation area. Right after they got there, someone opened fire on them. 2 firefighters were killed and one was severely injured from both the Coeur d'Alene Fire Department and Kootenai County Fire and Rescue. And they found the suspect dead at the scene. But yeah, that was what happened a few weeks ago to unfortunately prompt this act.
Well, and tell us about this, because I had not heard of this before. Who was Graham-Hoffman?
So our Idaho senators teamed up with a senator from Missouri. Graham-Hoffman was a Kansas City firefighter paramedic who in late April was stabbed and killed during a routine medical transportation. Ew. So he's another first responder who just recently was killed in the line of duty.
Wow. Oh, that's horrific. So this act, if it passed, would make it a federal crime, and that's a different separate process than, say, local law enforcement. What would the penalties be on a federal level?
So it would only be charged under circumstances where the federal government has jurisdiction, which is kind of a complicated legal thing. But basically, if it is allowed to be charged in federal court, it would enhance the penalties for this sort of thing. And in many cases, if someone was convicted of this, they could face up to 10 years in prison. Or if someone were killed as a result of an attack or there was a kidnapping involved, they could face up to life in prison. So it'd be significantly higher penalties.
Wow. Okay. So what's next for the act? What does it have to go through both houses of Congress still?
Yeah, so it was just introduced. Last I checked, it didn't even have like a bill number yet. So it'll still have to go through like the committee process and then be heard by the full chamber on both sides.
Wow. Okay. I know you'll keep an eye on that. Max, Valley County property values hit a record high again. This is not the first time it's done it. How much money are we talking about, and how much higher is it from last year?
That's right. We hit another high value. We cover this every year, but I always kind of enjoy this story because the figures are sometimes truly astounding.
Oh, man.
Property values this year hit a record high of $12.7 billion,
Oh, my
according to
gosh.
the assessor's office.
And that's just Valley
let's
County?
see, just Valley County.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And that's up from 11.8 billion last year. So we're looking at 924 million more in property value. And compared to 10 years ago in 2015, that was 3.2 billion. So it's quite a significant increase.
You aren't kidding about the numbers. So what's causing the increase? Is there something other than the rising property values we're seeing all over the state because it's nice and fun to live in Idaho?
Right. Most of that increase is just kind of the steady rise of property values based on what people are paying for new property. But some of it is new construction, which also hit an all-time high for the third year in a row. So that's added to the property rolls after it's completed. Let's see, 2025, that value added was over $288 million, a record again, beating last year's total by $17 million.
Wow. And I saw from your story that everybody seems to want Payette Lake property. Not that I blame them. What does the hike look like there? I mean, who wouldn't want to live on Payette Lake? And I think you mentioned in the story that those values may have hit their limit. Can we talk a little bit about that?
Yes, possibly. Yeah, everybody wants Payette Lakefront property, but few, I think, can afford it at this point. Lakefront values on the lake jumped to a new high, just like everything else, but this was pretty wild. It's an additional cost of $34,400 per linear foot of beachfront. So that is kind of the value in addition to the land and the buildings on that land, like assessed value. That's what they're paying over that value. So it's a lot. That is the last year's total cost for that was $26,700, and 10 years ago it was only $10,000 per linear foot, which is still a lot, but this is more than 3 times that.
Oh, wow.
We talked to the assessor's office kind of to clarify that total, like, are you sure? And they really think that might be the peak of it for now. As long as they did clarify that they don't want to make any strong speculation about this, so a bit of a caveat. But if the market continues on its current path, we might not see an increase in that lakefront value for a couple of years, which kind of makes sense. It's pretty high.
Yeah, it is. Some good info, good numbers in the Star News story. Check it out. And if you have a time machine, we can all go back to 2015 and maybe buy a couple of feet of Payette Lake property because it's cheaper.
Right? If only. Yeah.
Brian, the Idaho Statesman had an opinion piece on tariffs in Idaho, talking about how tariffs affect everyone. I think this is fascinating. You said in the story that housing, food, and used car prices are all up. So let's talk about more increases. Since we're talking about increases, how much has it gone up?
Well, food is up 3% over last year. The same with used cars. And nationwide, the cost of housing is up about 4% over the last year. Those are all well above the target rates that the Federal Reserve bank tries to hit for generally they're aiming for about 2% inflation per year. The interesting news now is that for a while the basically at all times, except in recessions, there's generally some amount of inflation happening. Prices generally go up over time. But the aim is to keep that rate of rise at about 2%. But what's been happening in the as more and more tariffs have taken effect is that the rate at which prices are rising, the rate of inflation is rising as well. And it's at about 2.7% for the latest month. And core inflation, which gets rid of some especially volatile categories of prices, is even higher at 2.9%.
Wow. Okay. A little disconcerting. I was really interested in what you had in there about what Albertsons is reporting. Can we talk a little bit about how customers are shifting their buying habits? And I have a story I want to share as we're talking about it. Go ahead.
Sure, sure, yeah. So yeah, Albertsons had a recent earnings call with investors, where it basically gives some updates on corporate finances and things like that. And one of the things that they noted is that there's been a pretty big shift from higher quality meat selections to things like pork and ground beef that indicate that people are looking to they're kind of trimming their budgets a little bit in response to higher prices. There are some other indicators of this as well in other parts of the economy. The prices for used cars went up substantially. They've been up for quite a while. But the price of new cars actually fell, which is kind of surprising. But it indicates probably a couple of things. One, that people are again trimming their budgets, and second, that to the degree people were going to buy new cars, they've probably done it ahead of tariffs taking effect. And so now that that sort of wave of preparation has passed, you're starting to see prices actually fall as demand slackens off for them.
I have to say, I have, and this is totally anecdotal, I've seen this in Albertsons and other stores about when you're talking about meat and different kinds of meat. It used to be, at least when I was shopping, that you saw quite a few cuts of really good steak that would be in the bins, and you would see stacks of them. And now you see maybe one, maybe two. The prices are really high. Obviously, the cost has gone up, but you just don't see as many of those. And I thought it was because the price was up, but obviously you're talking about the fact that people are changing what they buy. They're not buying those expensive cuts, so the stores aren't putting them out because then they just go bad, and they're buying the cheaper cuts. I think that's fascinating.
Yeah, that seems quite likely. The category that includes beef and veal from in the inflation report notes that it's well over 10% inflation over the last year for that. So you've seen especially dramatic price increases there. Some other ones where you've seen quite large price increases are things like coffee and a few other items.
And Albertsons, I saw as well in your story that it's trying to cut labor costs as part of the tariffs.
Yeah, so this is something that's been reported previously, but there've been a few hundred jobs, management level jobs at Albertsons that have been offshored in the last year or so. This is particularly striking because that's one way to cut costs, but this one of the supposed benefits of tariffs was supposed to be onshoring jobs, and at least in this case, it's doing the opposite. It seems to be hastening the flight of them offshore.
Wow. Okay, it's a fascinating piece. It's an opinion piece in the Idaho Statesman. Brian, thanks. I really appreciate it. This is fascinating.
Thanks.
Laura, you took a very complicated story about the possible effects of changes to Medicaid under the Big Beautiful Bill and you put a human face on it. And I want to talk about the possible changes first. What are optional benefits in Medicaid? I had not heard this term. Please educate us.
Yeah, so Medicaid is a federal program, but states have the ability to create their own plan in terms of how they administer it. There's a number of benefits that are required. So, primary care, for in most cases, hospital stays, things like that. But there's other types of services that states can offer. There's things like physical therapy, occupational therapy, dental is considered an optional benefit. Home and community-based services, like in the long term, is an optional benefit. There's some requirements for short-term home-based care, but yeah, those are some of the examples of things that states can offer, but they're not required to under the law.
And so when I was reading the story, I think you're saying that the big, beautiful bill, which went through Congress and has become law, it doesn't cut these optional benefits you're talking about, but that they could get cut as a consequence of the bill. Can you explain that?
Yeah, so the bill is massive and complicated, and I think a lot of people are unsure of the exact outcomes that will happen. But essentially, it does make it harder. It will lower the amount of money that's in the program. One of the ways it will do this is it limits something called provider taxes, which are something that states can use to tax hospitals and facilities, and then use that money from the tax to basically increase the amount of money that they get a match from the federal government from. And essentially what folks who follow this sort of thing are looking at is like, well, less money is going to be in the system, which means how are we going to pay for the things that we have now? And the concern is anything that is optional could be some of the first things on the chopping block if states have to make some difficult decisions in terms of how they're going to cover their bill.
And you talked to Kristen Herbert and Destiny about this story. Who are they? Tell us about them.
Kristen Herbert lives in Meridian, and she lives with her beloved baby, as she refers to her, which is her cat named Destiny. And Kristen is one of the folks who she has a physical disability. She's in a chair. She doesn't have a lot of fine motor control. So she really needs help with pretty much all the basics of living. She, she's very smart, and she knows what she wants. For instance, she's a really good cook in terms of she can come up with the recipes, but she needs someone there to actually prepare it. So she relies on the what are called home and community-based services to pay staff to come into her home and make sure she's having those needs taken care of, which means that she doesn't have to live in like a nursing home.
What? And you broke this down. I think it's important. She's on Medicare for her basic needs, and then Medicaid pays for her in-home health care?
With Kristen, she might be on Medicare. Someone else I talked to, Tara Rowe, she's dually enrolled in Medicare and Medicaid. And she is in that similar boat where Medicare covers some of her kind of basic needs to a certain level. And then anything that she needs beyond that level, Medicaid kind of fills that gap for her.
Gotcha. So if Kristen's in-home healthcare money goes away, she could go into a care facility, but you point out there are not enough beds in Idaho, and that's a pretty big gap. How big is it?
Yeah, there's, I believe, about 6,000 beds in Idaho, but there's something like 20,000 people in Idaho who use Medicaid for home and community-based services. So, and if you qualify for home and community-based services, you're also determined to require a nursing home level of care. So if you don't have that, then you likely need some sort of skilled nursing facility. But like you said, there's just really not enough beds in the state.
Right. And you pointed out that Kristen doesn't want to go into a care facility. Who could blame her? I mean, loss of a lot of independence there. So, what are her options if the optional benefit were to go away?
She doesn't know. I mean, she, like you said, she really doesn't want to go into a nursing facility for a lot of reasons. A major one is she could not take Destiny with her.
Mm.
She's also just worried, staffing levels are an issue there sometimes, and she's afraid she'd get put in a bed and left there. Health outcomes are not always as good in those type of facilities, like a congregate type of facility, than people who get to stay in their home. She has a close friend who's one of her caregivers as well, and the friend said, we'll try and figure something out, but she can't live with the friend who lives in a 1-bedroom apartment and can't afford to move, and she's not allowed to have cats. So they're really totally unsure of what they'll do if that were to be cut.
Right, right. All right. I know you'll follow that story. Sarah, I want to stick with Medicaid because you wrote a story about state Medicaid benefits that have already been cut. This one confuses me, so help me out. The state will no longer pay parents to take care of their kids who need help?
Yes, totally fair. This is a very confusing topic, but basically, Medicaid helps pay for caregivers for kids and for people with disabilities. But historically, parents have not been allowed to fill that role. Medicaid was basically worried that the line between parenting and caregiving was too blurry and that they would end up just paying parents to parent, like, making a sandwich for their kid or something. So traditionally, they've required families to bring in an outside caregiver. But during COVID, with people being, so worried about strangers coming into their homes, requirement and gave states the option to pay parents to be the caregivers. And as Laura said, states get to decide how they want to administer their Medicaid programs. So in this case, Idaho took the federal government up on that offer. But for reasons that frankly nobody seems to quite understand, that change got super expensive for the state. So for now, at least, as of July 15th, the state has killed that program. So Medicaid will no longer pay parents to be the caregiver.
Well, you also put a face on this. You went and talked to Nathan and Brady Hill. Tell us about them. Who are they?
Yeah, Brady is a 16-year-old living in Meridian. He was diagnosed with brain cancer at age 1, and he's recovered from the cancer, but the treatments that he got for it have left him with lasting disabilities. He eats through a feeding tube, he relies on a ventilator to breathe at night, he has trouble controlling his emotions. So basically, he needs a lot of help and supervision for everyday tasks. His father, Nathan, has provided a lot of that care over the years, and for years has advocated for Medicaid to just pay the parents to do this care rather than forcing families to bring in an outside worker. He said that working with outside caregivers was a racket because the parents end up doing so much of the work anyway, and the workers turn over so frequently that the parents kind of de facto, it falls on them. But so when Medicaid did change its policy during COVID, Nathan was finally able to be a paid caregiver for Brady. And so for him, that meant, he could finally just focus on providing consistent care for his son rather than scrambling to both care for him, but also hold down a, full-time job separate from that.
Wow. And you mentioned that the program was cut just 3 days ago. And we're also talking, just like in the last story about Medicaid, about a lack of resources. Tell me about the caregiver crisis. What is it? How bad is it?
Yeah, so that was one of the drivers for why this option was opened up to begin with, I guess you could say. But basically, Idaho has fewer caregiver positions than the national average. I think in 2022, we were about 3,000 caregivers short of the average, and that number has grown since. That said, the Department of Health and Welfare, which oversees Medicaid in the state and oversaw this program, said that the number of had increased about 10% since 2022. That was part of their justification for cutting the program of parent caregiving. But Nathan, who we just talked about, he actually conducted his own survey of 100 caregiving agencies, And his survey found that 90% of the families who had been relying on this family caregiver program would not be able to access an outside caregiver once it ended. I asked
Wow.
Health and Welfare about Nathan's survey, and they said they weren't aware of it, so they couldn't really respond to his findings. But basically, we have sort of different reports on exactly how dire the shortage is right now.
So what happens to Nathan and Brady and other parents and kids? The programs we said was cut 3 days ago. What do they do?
So the parents I spoke to are definitely in a bind. Several of them have been calling around to different direct care agencies and trying to see if they have any workers available, and it seems like many are coming up empty pretty much. So in the short term, they're kind of back to where they were before this option existed in terms of patching together care, perhaps providing care without being paid for it. But of course, if you are providing care without being paid for it, that may mean that you can't take another job outside the home. So some of the parents raised the idea that they may in turn land on Medicaid themselves or food stamps themselves or other social programs. It's kind of shifting the burden around potentially. Health and Welfare did say it's happy to help families try to find caregivers if they're having trouble, but it also did encourage them to get creative. So, for example, someone like Nathan could care for another family's child with a disability, and then that parent could care for Brady. One mother I spoke to said she had looked into that, but no luck so far. But I guess I'll leave you with to give you a sense of the family's predicament. That mother is considering driving for DoorDash so that she can earn some money, but her two kids who have Down syndrome and autism could be riding along in the back seat.
Wow. Okay. It's a very in-depth story. Check it out. We'll have it on our website. Thank you for telling us about it. Max, you had a great story about a wildfire app. It's called Watch Duty. I have to say, this is a very incredible resource, especially for folks who live in or play in Idaho's wild areas. Tell us about the app. What does it do? What kind of info does it provide?
Yeah, it's been very helpful for us in McCall, especially in Cascade, which had a pretty active fire season last summer, to say the least. The app provides kind of active stats that are very up to date on wildfires: acreage, containment percentages, wind speed, direction, evacuation orders, the size of the fire perimeter, and a map, the number of firefighters deployed, kind of the aircraft. You can pay for an upgrade to the free app and get live water tanker and helicopter tracking. It's kind of everything you want to know about a fire, all in one place. And this story kind of came about out of our curiosity of like whether we would be able to cover fires effectively this summer with the decrease in Forest Service staff because of federal downsizing. We were kind of unsure if the Forest Service had the capacity or even the permission to share fire news. But thankfully, that did not; those fears really didn't come to fruition. The Forest Service is still doing a great job of getting us fire information. But this app is still pretty useful. It makes improvements in some of the typical ways we get our fire information. Like while we're on this call, I got a notification about firefighting efforts on the Rush Fire, which is up in the northeastern corner of Valley County on the Big Creek. And there's a fire threatening the Taylor Ranch, which is it's a backcountry ranch operated by the University of Idaho. And now we kind of know exactly what's going on with the Taylor Ranch. So it's it's a great resource.
And the app just told you that while we were speaking.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so who runs the app? Is this AI? Is it humans? Who's doing the work?
Yeah, thankfully it is humans. The organization behind it is a nonprofit based in California. The company has 20 employees, 200 volunteers, and every update on each of the fires is completed by a human, they say, and confirmed with officials, which is kind of the important part. They kind of watch for official updates, verify those, and then post them to each fire. And that information is all publicly available. Like we can go out and find it ourselves. Incident management teams, public information officers, the National Interagency Fire Center. Wildcat is a computer program that Forest Service and other fire agencies use to get information out, but they're kind of all not the most accessible things. So this just puts them all in front of your face all at once.
Well, you talked to Cascade's fire chief. He actually uses the app, talks about how much it helps. I've got to say, just what you're talking about, as someone who's had to gather all this info for my job from a bunch of different sources, it's complicated and it takes time. And this sounds like a great resource where you could get it, all at once. How many people do we know in Valley County are using the app?
That was one of the more surprising things I found out in this story. So Watch Duty has 16 million users across the country. That's crazy. But in Valley County, there are 7,520 users. In a county we have about 12,000 permanent residents, so
Wow.
most people have it. In Adams County, that number is over 2,800 people, and Adams County has a permanent population of about 4,400 people. So we're all kind of looking at the same thing here.
It's popular. It must work.
It
It's
is,
popular.
yeah.
Okay, and you caution in the story, other people caution, does not replace official sources, right? But it is a great aggregate.
Yes, yeah, we probably won't be directly quoting Watch Duty in an article, but it is great. My source for the story, who worked for the company, was clear that the app has limitations. They said it's a trusted aggregator and not a replacement for official community or agency communications. That it's one tool in the toolbox. So yeah, I think it's not quite everything, but it's a lot of things. It's definitely an improvement over kind of the social media rumor mill that you can have during a fire.
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh. Yes, that is so true. And I love that it actually told you stuff while we were talking. I think that's it. Did it just send you a notification?
Yeah, had a little thing pop up on my screen.
Wow. Okay. This is great, Max. Thank you very much. And Max, I am going to jump to the end because I cannot not do this. Let's talk sheep. You've got a lot of sheep heading for the Payette National Forest. Where do they come from, and why are they going into the forest?
That's right. The sheep have arrived. This is something that happens up here every year, and we cover it every once in a while, but really dove into it this year because it was just good timing and it was really interesting. There are 4 bands of about 8,000 sheep total, owned by the Weiser-based Solon Livestock Company. The company's been doing this for 99 years,
Wow.
and the sheep live almost their entire lives on public land. It's really cool. They just arrived on the Payette last week, and they're going to kind of spend the summer here as they make their big journey around the state. It's a kind of a big circle that they run. From Weiser to McCall, they eventually go down to Cuna, and it's about 600 miles that the sheep walk on foot
Wow.
throughout the year.
So why public land? Why do they bring the sheep to public land to graze?
Well, there are some companies that keep their sheep on their own land, but for a company that I can't say specifically why this company does that. I think they just don't have enough land to keep that many sheep on there. So this kind of allows more sheep, a bigger business, a little bit more growth, and it does help the Payette a little bit as well. They go on specific tracks through the forest, and they are required to kind of stay there so they don't, overgraze one area.
Mm-hmm.
And the benefit of that is also a little bit of fire reduction. They eat some of the more burnable, low-lying materials.
I like
But
sheep.
it kind of creates a profitable business, grazing on federal land.
Sheep firefighters. I'm all for it.
Right.
Some folks in Boise may be familiar with this process. We do have a similar crossing each year as the sheep head to their summer range. So, what can people do to help, and more importantly, to not get in the way of the sheep? What should we watch out for?
Right. It is possible to come across this band of sheep out in the woods. I was on a bike ride a couple years ago and came into a meadow, and it was absolutely filled with sheep. And it's like, oh my God. So I just slowly rode my bike right through the middle of this thing, which was honestly kind of scary. And it turns out I did the wrong thing. The sheep they live with herding dogs and guard dogs. And then the guard dogs are really there mostly to protect from predators like wolves and coyotes, and which mostly attack at night, but they're with the sheep all the time. And they can get a little protective if people are walking their dogs near the sheep, particularly if the dogs attack the sheep. So the Forest Service asks that, people keep their dogs on leashes near the band, dismount your bike and walk through the middle. Don't do what I did. If you're on a motorcycle, just go really slow. And if you're out walking in the forest and you see these, maybe just kind of wait till they pass by or take a slightly different route.
Wow, this is a great story. Max, thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Samantha.
We've been speaking with Sarah Cutler, reporter with the Idaho Statesman, Max Silverson, editor of the Star News, Laura Guido with the Idaho Capital Sun, and Brian Clark, the Idaho Statesman opinion writer for our Reporter Roundtable, which we have every Friday at noon.
This is the Idaho Matters podcast. I'm Gemma Gaudette.
These days, there's so much news, it can be hard to keep up with what it all means for you, your family, and your community. The Consider This podcast from NPR features our award-winning journalism. 6 days a week, we bring you a deep dive on a news story and provide the context and analysis that helps you make sense of the news. We get behind the headlines. We get to the truth. Listen to the Consider This podcast from NPR.